Well, it's great to welcome you back once again as we continue our studies of New Testament Greek. If you've been following along, then you know at this point we're coming to chapter 12 of Machen's wonderful little textbook. This is pretty straightforward once again. We've been dealing with the imperfect tense. This is the second of the tenses of the Greek verb that we have encountered. Of course, the first was the present tense, and we looked at the active, middle, and passive voices. Now we're coming to what's called the imperfect tense, and we've looked at the imperfect active, eluon, elus, elua, eluomen, eluita, eluon. And at this point we're moving, as you probably would have expected, to the middle and passive voices of this imperfect tense. Once again, it's convenient because at least at this point the endings are the same both in the middle and the passive. And as we were indicating in chapter 11, the middle voice as such is not used all that frequently in the New Testament. What we really find is that the endings need to be learned more or less because of the frequency that deponent verbs show up, and those deponent verbs, of course, will make use at times of the middle endings, at times of the passive endings, and so it's important to be familiar with both of them. But the middle and passive, and we'll focus on the passive here of the imperfect, is simply going to be referring to passive action that's taking place on a continuous basis in the past tense, that is to say in past time. So I could say I loose the slave, and that would be present tense, luo doulon, I loose the slave. Or I could say I was loosing the slave, eluon, I was loosing, doulon, the slave. Or I could say I was being loosed by the slave. And when I shift it into that kind of arrangement, then of course that moves us to the passive voice. And that's going to be eluomein, hupo, to doulo. So I was being released or loosed by the slave. So that's the basic idea that we're dealing with here. So that's pretty straightforward. I don't think you'll have any trouble following that. Really, the new information you need to pick up from this chapter is simply the distinctive endings that are used with the middle and passive voice. And as I say, they're identical in both the middle and the passive, and so you're not going to have any additional complications. That won't always be the case as we move along, but at least at this point, you only have to learn one new set of endings. The new endings are eluomein, eluu, elueto, eluometha, eluestha, eluonto. They're in the book, and you can follow along, and of course we'll make a few more comments as we go along with respect to those. A couple of other details that show up in this chapter that you'll want to make note of. It's an idiom in the Greek language that if you have a neuter plural noun, it can, and often does in the New Testament, take a singular verb. So for example, the Greek word Dymonione is a neuter noun, you see. So if I were to refer to demons in the plural, the demons, normally in English we would say the demons were possessing the man, but or the demons are, put it in the present tense. But in the Greek language you can also use the word is. It doesn't sound like very good English. Literally it would be the demons is possessing the man. We wouldn't want to translate it that way, but that would be literally the way the Greek would read. So just keep your eye on that. You'll notice that the exercises actually make somewhat frequent use of that, and so as you're going along, don't be confused by it. The other little additional idea that you want to deal with in this chapter are additional uses of the word kai and ouda. We've already had, of course, both of those words. The normal meaning of the word kai, the one that's most frequent, is that kai, of course, means and. It's a simple connective in the Greek language. And ouda can mean nor or not even, that idea. But when they're used in couplets, in other words, kai followed by a phrase and then kai followed by a phrase, you'll notice that sometimes the sense of that combination will be both and, both this and that. And so keep your eye on that. Sometimes when kai doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense in its context, it's being used in a couplet with another kai in the sentence, and that, of course, is going to be the sense of it. We've already taken a look at the sense in which kai can be a sort of an emphasis word It can mean even, it can mean also. Those are additional meanings of the word kai as well. Uda also has other meanings. It can mean not and nor, neither this nor that idea. And so once again, as you're working through, you'll notice those peculiar applications of those words. So that's really the heart of what's going on in this chapter. I want to work through the vocabulary list with you once again and comment on the words, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at some exercises, and that should take care of this chapter 12. So let's first of all take a look at these vocabulary words. The first of our words you'll notice here is the word aperkomai, aperkomai. You immediately notice that this is a combination of a couple of words. We have ap, which is from the preposition apo, which means from, and of course erkomai, deponent verb we've already had, and it means I come or I go. But in the case of this particular combination, the idea is I go away. Not too surprising, aperkomai, I go away. Biblion is a word that you'll probably immediately recognize. Our English word Bible comes from biblion. The basic meaning of the word is simply a book. You may be interested in knowing that in the ancient region of Phoenicia, which was on the coast north of Israel, where there were some famous cities, you recall Tyre, Sidon, Berytos, and so on, one of the cities that was associated with Phoenicia was Byblos, and so that particular city was famous for its papyrus, and that happened to be the meaning that was attached to it, that's the place where you produce books, you see, from papyrus, and so that particular name stuck. And so when we talk about the Bible, we're talking about a book, and it comes from this Greek word biblion, which means book. It's neuter, you'll notice here. And so you want to keep that in mind as you're dealing with it in the exercises. Dymonione is the word from which we get the word demon, and of course that is the meaning of the word in the Greek language. It again is neuter, and it's declined in the ordinary way, so daimonion, demon. Dekomai, a deponent verb, means I receive. It is somewhat synonymous with lambano, except you'll recall that lambano is a somewhat more aggressive word. It can mean I take or I receive. It has a little bit more of an active sense to it. Dekomai, a little bit more passive. It only means to receive. It's quite common in the New Testament, and it's, as I say, deponent, and so you'll see that come up quite often. The next word is ekperuomai. We already actually had the Greek word perumai, which means I go. Not surprisingly, ekperuomai, using this preposition ek in combination with the verb go, means I go out, I exit, something like erkomai, that word that we've also had, somewhat synonymous with that, ekperuomai. Ergon is the word that means work. It's neuter. If you've studied physics, then you probably know that there is a English word erg, which is a measure of work, and we get that word straight from the Greek language, ergon, which means work, so that may help you remember that one. Eti is the word that means yet or still. It's an adverb. You're only going to find it in this particular form, which is always kind of nice, eti. And so you'll see that quite frequently, of course, in the New Testament. Thalassa is a word that means lake. You may know a English adjective, the word thalassic, which is usually a way of describing something that's peaceful, but it's derived from this notion of a lake, and the implication, of course, is it would be a peaceful lake, and so we have that word from the Greek language. I mentioned earlier kai and kai, the combination here. When taken together, kai can mean and, it can mean also, it can mean even, kind of an intensifier, an emphasizer, and it also can be used in combination with another word kai, and in that case it can mean both and. Katerkamai, we've already had the word kata. You know that that is a preposition that can mean down. When we use it with the verb erkamai, it would mean, not surprisingly, I go down. Next we have uda, which again is similar to what we were seeing with kai and kai. Uda can mean and not, it can mean nor, it can mean not even, and it can mean in combination with another neither nor. So again, you'll probably recognize that quite readily as you're seeing it in the exercises. Upo is an adverb. It means not yet. I commented earlier that there is the Greek word uketi, which if you looked at it, literally would appear to mean not yet, but it actually means no longer. You recall that. Upo is the word that means not yet, so go figure. That's just the way those prepositions work. Peri, you know, this particular prefix is often found in English words. We have words like perimeter and other words. Perinatal is a word that's sometimes used in the medical profession. Peri is a word that means concerning if it's used with the genitive case, or about or around with the accusative case. And so you'll notice that in the vocabulary. Again, the genitive, it can mean concerning, about. With the accusative, it can mean around. And of course, that's the sense in which we commonly find it in combination in English words. Ploion, don't know any English words that are connected to this one. It means a boat. So you'll just have to learn that. It's a neuter noun, as you notice. Sun erkamai, we've had this sun preposition before. You know that the English form of that is actually syn. So we have synthetic, synthesize, synchronize, and all kinds of words that use that particular prefix. Well, it's taken from this Greek word sun, which means together with. Sunerkamai, then, in this particular combination, not surprisingly, means I come together, or we come together, if it were in the first person plural. You get the idea there. Huper, finally, is the last of our vocabulary words. This is a preposition with the genitive. It means in behalf of. Huper with the accusative means above. You know that something is hyper in English if it's above. Hyperactive, that idea means above normal. It comes from this notion of huper, which is used with the accusative to mean above. We also find the word often used in the New Testament to describe the work of Christ. Christ is said to do things on our behalf. And invariably, when we're speaking of Christ acting on our behalf, the word that will be used is this word huper. And so, as you can imagine, the word shows up quite frequently in the New Testament in that connection. I mentioned to you earlier the endings that are associated with the middle and passive voice, and so this is just a little reminder of them. So it's eluomein, eluu, eluato, eluomatha, eluestha, eluonto. Probably the best thing to do is just to learn to say those in your mind. Just repeat them a few times, and pretty soon they'll get to be kind of second nature, you know. But you want to keep adding to your memory banks these words, these endings, as we go along. You'll find that with each chapter, especially in this part of the book, we're going to continue adding new endings. And you'll find that if you've mastered the prior endings, then it's going to make your task considerably easier, and there's going to be a lot less confusion as you're doing the exercises if you just make a little practice of and discipline of memorizing those endings. So just take the time to do that. You'll find it pays off, and that'll be my only encouragement in that connection. Just wanted to remind you of those. All right, and I think we're ready to take a look at some exercises. So we'll take a look at the first three of the Greek to English exercises, and then of course, as we have been doing, we'll look at the first three of the English to Greek, and hopefully you can take it from there. The answer key has been provided to you, so you can work through and hopefully figure out the rest of them as you compare your work to the answer key. Here's the first one. Agraphonto hutoi hoi logoi in biblio. Well, I notice right off the bat the first word that is presented to me that may seem a little bit unexpected if I hadn't read this chapter is this agraphonto. Of course, I immediately recognize grapho means I write. This epsilon tells me it's a secondary tense, so it's going to refer to action in the past. The onto I recognize as the third person plural ending, and this is associated with the imperfect middle or passive. Here it certainly is going to be passive. So with the plural, it's going to mean in and of itself, they were being written. You see that? Imperfect passive, they were being written. Now I ask myself, well, what was being written? And I find here something in the nominative case, the demonstrative pronoun hutoi. Hoi, these, the words, literally. We translated, of course, these words, and then the verb makes sense. These words were being written in, takes the dative, and of course this is a new vocabulary word, in biblio, in a book. And so these words were being written in a book. Next exercise, number 2, e didaskomein hupautou ek ton biblion ton propheton. Well, I look at this first word, I see e didaskomein, and of course I immediately recognize that's from didasko, I teach. I notice the augment, it's going to be past time. The omein, I notice, is the first person singular, imperfect, middle or passive ending. Here it's going to be the passive. And so I'm going to render it, I was being taught. I was being taught. Then hoop is the preposition that means by, commonly used with passive settings. Hupautou, by him. I was being taught by him. Ek, out of, takes the genitive. Ton, biblion, out of the books, genitive case here. Ton, propheton, of the prophets. I was being taught by him out of the books of the prophets. And the third of our translation exercises, we start with in. I know that is a preposition. It takes the dative. In, akanais, tais, hemerais, in those, the days. But of course we don't mention the there. That's the idiom in the Greek language, so we're simply going to say in those days. Then I see the word kai, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. I would normally think, well, it means and, but it doesn't quite make sense with this. And then I notice, of course, there's another kai here, and I suspect that's what's going on is a kai-kai combination, right? And so I'm going to render it that way, and we'll see how it works out. In those days, both, you see, we'll do that. Then e didaskometha, this is the first person plural, imperfect, passive. So in those days, we were both being taught, hupautou, by him, kai, and, so it's both and, we were both being taught by him, and now we have, again, imperfect, but notice it's the imperfect active ending, and we were teaching, tous, alus, the others. So in those days, we were both being taught by him, and we were teaching the others. And then continuing the rest of the sentence, we have Allah, the strong conjunction, but now, which really does signal to us that we're going to be moving to the present tense from the imperfect that we had earlier. But now, uda, and we notice it's in parallel with uda, so it's probably going to be a neither nor arrangement. But now, neither are we being taught. See, ometha is the first person plural passive ending, but there's no augment back here. It tells us that this is in the present tense. But now we are no longer being taught, nor, and then didaskome or didaskamen, nor are we teaching. So we go from the passive voice to the active voice. But now we are neither being taught nor are we teaching. So it really parallels the first part of this. And you notice it's helpful because in this one sentence, Machen has given us really all four of the various usages that we've learned so far. The present, active and passive, and the imperfect, active and passive. So if you can wind your way through that exercise with little difficulty, then I think so far so good. You really got the feel for how these endings and the various grammatical meaning that they have, how they are to be applied. All right, so continuing, let's take a look at the first of the composition exercises. The exercise itself in Machen reads, "Those words were being heard by the same apostle, but now they are no longer being heard." Those words were being heard by the same apostle. So let's see what we have. Those, akenoi, demonstrative pronoun, hoi lagoi, those, the words, those words. This were being heard, I recognize as the imperfect passive, and it's the third person plural, so it's going to be ekuonto. Notice that when I augment an alpha, it becomes an eta. So those words were being heard, hupo, by, and then the same. You recall that we're going to have the attributive position here, tu autu, the same, apostolu, apostle. Those words were being heard by the same apostle, comma, but now, and you could have also said nun da if you want, that would have been fine. It would have looked like this. So you'd have a circumflex there, nun da. Either way is fine. But now, uketi, no longer, akuantai, now this is the present passive, no longer are they being heard, third person plural. Those words were being heard by the same apostle, but now no longer are they being heard. Next exercise. These books were being written by him in behalf of his servants. These books were being written. So tauta ta biblia. These, the books, neuter, new vocabulary word. This is, of course, the nominative, tauta ta biblia. These words were being written. Now I use the plural ending, agraphonto. They were being written, but keep in mind that a neuter plural subject could use the singular ending, in which case this would be agrapheto. So you could do it either way. Either way is fine. In fact, both ways are very common in the New Testament, but I did it the way that probably would be expected at this point. These books were being written, hupautu, by, takes the genitive, him, hupautu, huper, in behalf of, ton, the slaves of him. These were being written in behalf of his servants, is the way we had the sentence in the exercise, and so that should be correct. These books were being written by him in behalf of the servants of him, or his servants. And the last of our exercises. I was not yet being taught by this man, but I was leading the others to him. I was not yet being taught by this man. We know the word not yet is upo. It is an adverb, and so it's always going to be in that form. Not yet, eididaskomein. This is the first person singular, imperfect passive. Not yet was I being taught. Hupo, by, takes the genitive, tutu, to, anthropu, by this the man. Not yet was I being taught by this man. Allah, but it, of course, contracts here because it's preceding a word that begins with a vowel. But, now notice, I was leading. This is from ago. You've already had that. And you know that now if we're going to put it in the imperfect, we need to augment, so it becomes the eta. Then we put the ending on, which is the imperfect active, first person singular, and I know that an omicron is short, so therefore I need to put a circumflex on the eta, because, of course, if the last syllable is short, a long accented penult must have the circumflex. So, but I was leading, tous, alus, the others, pros, auton, to him. I see I forgot my accent right there. Pros, auton, to him. Use the word pros when movement is implied in the text, and here, of course, with agon, I was leading, the word pros would be expected. And so I was leading the others to him. So hopefully that is meaningful and helpful, and I'm expecting you to now to go ahead and do the rest of the exercises. That is your chore and your responsibility, and hopefully your delight. I really do hope that as you work through these, you'll just take the time to enjoy it. I don't know if you're under any time constraints or not, but hopefully not. And the real joy of doing this is just to let it kind of soak in, think about it, reflect on it, compare your work to the answer keys. If you have any problems, just keep working on it and thinking it through until it finally makes sense. And when you're comfortable with this chapter, when you have the imperfect, active, middle, and passive, and you really feel like you've got these ideas under control, then we'll move on to chapter 13. And chapter 13 introduces some very important new ideas. And so when you're ready to go, I'll welcome you back in our little classroom here, and we'll continue from there. Until then, I hope God continues to richly bless you in your studies, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.